Welcome to
Ozpol.
This week's episode was all about
Merge.
I will continue to work with every single Premier and Chief Minister to continue to bring them together to focus on the national plan.
We are merging.
But some tribes are resisting the urge to merge.
There's an Australia outside of New South Wales. 5 states and territories don't have COVID. We're very keen to keep it that way.
The Australian people want their liberties and their freedoms back. They don't want 2 hermit kingdoms, parked off to the side.
I want to preserve our lifestyle. I want to see Queenslanders being kept safe.
We acknowledge and accept that in some instances people will get sick and tragically some people will die.
Dirty dog!
Leon, what sort of level of death are you comfortable with?
Comfortable with? I'm a doctor. None. No. Sorry, you've got me quite upset now.
The head of National Cabinet, Anastasia Palaszczuk, threatened to break the National Reopening Alliance unless she got more modelling on the danger Delta poses to kids.
I stand by what I believe in, but I will not be making decisions when I don't see detailed modelling.
Blindside.
But the PM didn't blink.
I would just expect us to have a good discussion to be better understanding the implications of the Doherty modelling.
If anyone has a hidden immunity idol and you want to play it, now'll be the time to do so.
Turns out the PM just secured 4 million immunity idols.
The government has been able to secure with the government of the United Kingdom a Pfizer swap deal, which will see 4 million doses of Pfizer come to Australia this month.
This is the happiest moment of my life.
Don't fall for Scott Morrison's marketing tactics.
From Downing Street to Down Under, we are doubling down.
There was good news for Aussies stranded interstate and overseas too. South Australia's home quarantine trial expanding to other states.
I agree with the Prime Minister on Wednesday, as I think New South Wales have agreed also, to run a home-based quarantine pilot here in Victoria.
All in all, a decent day for
A strong and stable government.
Bound to happen one day.
Well, speaking of strong and stable, The Guardian's Amy Remeikis joins us now from Canberra. Amy, the Queensland Premier says she's willing to walk away from the national plan to protect unvaccinated kids in Queensland. Do you think there's genuine concern there, or is this all just politics?
I think it's half of one, like half of the other, really, with that one. There is concern for children. I think any parent is feeling that at the moment. Whether or not that will be what makes Queensland leave the national plan is a completely different story, though. We have seen Anastasia Palaszczuk walk that back today. She has said that she is part of the national plan. She just wants a conversation about what measures will be occurring to protect children who cannot be vaccinated, because at the moment, there is no vaccine in Australia that is approved to vaccinate kids under 12.
It's on this stoush, though, between the states and the federal government. In the case of Queensland, it's lagging the rest of the country in the vaccine rollout. It's not just down to what vaccine's been made available, is it? Because that's the state where the Chief Health Officer was obviously basically scaring young people about using AstraZeneca. That clearly has had an impact, hasn't it?
It has had an impact. We're also seeing Western Australia, though, which is also lagging behind the national average. And when we talk about lagging, we are talking about 5 or 6 weeks behind as well. So it's not a huge gap, but it's not ideal. It was not helpful, that advice, but at the same time, it was based on the ATAGI advice. And the federal government probably compounded that when they told people, you too can wait for Pfizer. All of this happened before we were in the Delta emergency, which has completely changed the ball game. So I think in some of these states that have been lagging behind, you're going to see a little bit more urgency.
Amy, the ACT Chief Minister Andrew Barr said this today before National Cabinet.
Recognition that the Doherty modelling no longer supports anything crazy happening at 70% would be a really good outcome out of today's National Cabinet meeting.
Post that meeting, though, the PM's language was quite cautious around reopening. Do you think the states and territories have reined him in a bit?
I think everyone is starting to look at the nuance of the Doherty Institute plan, which showed that there were a lot of caveats over what could happen at 70%. We originally heard this 70% figure because it was something to give everyone hope, but essentially, until you have test, trace and isolate and quarantine under control, you cannot look at an open slather situation. That was never in the plan.
The other big development was home quarantine. New South Wales is already talking about opening up international travel. Do you think that will force the hand of states like Queensland and WA?
I don't think any of us can say what's going to force the hand of the states like WA and Queensland. I think we are going to see home quarantine. That has always been part of the plan, and we do have a lot of people who want to come home who are counting on it. Scott Morrison today was also very open about, yes, we need to start doing this. South Australia is trialling the program. There's going to be a little bit more of a wait, but I do think we're going to start to see more answers in the coming months.
Right now, though, still plenty of questions around, but great to have you on the show, Amy. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So that whole issue of international travel is bubbling further and further to the surface. New South Wales is saying that, or the Premier is saying she's comfortable with international travel once we reach that 80% by the end of the year. Victoria is sort of moving in that direction as well, whereas we've got Queensland and WA still with those closed borders. Come Christmas, how weird is that going to be?
Of course it's weird, but that's why this situation is kind of reaching ahead.
Yeah.
Because if you're the Premier of Queensland or WA and there's no COVID there and everyone's living normally while everyone in Victoria and New South Wales is going in and out of lockdown and quite sustained lockdown, how do you say to your population, oh yeah, we'll go for that?
You can't.
So,
there's got to be some point where those two premiers are going to have to pivot.
But surely they just have to hope that they can get the vaccination rates right up to the point that they can then go for broke, open the borders and let it come in without having to...
But Queenslanders and West Australians aren't getting vaccinated at the same rate, so they're really lagging.
Yeah.
It's curious.
From expert opinions to in-depth analysis and reporting, the Project YouTube brings you the biggest stories from Australia and around the globe. Hit the subscribe button now for news delivered straight to your feed.